What emotion does this sound evoke? Is it fear? Panic? Comfort? Well, whatever feeling it gives you, you can rest easy as we won't be hearing it again for the rest of this video. This is the challenge I've been most excited for. You see, I have a running document of challenges that I add to every time I think something has any potential. Some are good, some are bad, but this one, this one is one of the good ones. Going back as far as I can remember, the Metal Gear Solid series has hands down been my favorite of all time. I personally think it's the perfect medley of stealth, action, and story, as convoluted as it is. From my very first introduction to Snake in Metal Gear Solid 2, well kind of, I was a million times sold. And while I sat there patiently waiting for the next installment, I moved on to play other titles such as the Splinter Cell and Hitman games. These two franchises scratched a similar itch as Metal Gear, but never quite satisfied me in the same way. Also, as their franchises developed, I always felt as if the quality dipped along the way. Their flagship titles during the height of the original Xbox with the self-titled Hitman and Splinter Cell's Chaos Theory were fantastic. But time is a fickle bitch. And with either care, patience, or incentive slipping by the wayside, neither of them could compete with the genius that is Kojima. And sure, you could argue that over time the Metal Gear saga dipped in quality too, with Metal Gear Solid 4 being a little off the wall and Metal Gear Solid 2 featuring an entirely different character. But I believe that their story and core gameplay were so damn captivating that fans were willing to look past their own ideal versions and judge them off these instead. Preamble aside, I say all this mostly to set the stage for the challenge, yes, but also to let you know why I chose this game and why this video in particular is so special to me. Metal Gear Solid V. Yes, it's time to equip your favorite cardboard box because today we're going to be completing Metal Gear Solid V as a Jarhead.
Cypher sent us to hell, but we're going even deeper.
If you haven't heard yet, I'm going to fill you in now. The Jarhead challenge was cooked up by an incredibly creative person who goes by the name of Roni, and their challenge is by far the toughest challenge in MGSV. This challenge has all the capabilities in the world to homebrew it and tweak it like I am, but if you want the official guide Roni put together, I'll leave a link in the description. There's two versions Roni outlines in their guide, one regular and one extreme, and I've put together a bit of a hybrid between these two, leaning more on the extreme version. So, get to the point, Sweaty. What the fuck are these rules? Alright, let's start with deployment costs. My goal is to have this number remain as low as possible, incentivizing uncommon and strategic ways of completing missions. Before setting off on a mission, you can choose between 6 AM, 6 PM, and ASAP. ASAP is the only option for this challenge. You generally have an advantage of not being seen in the nighttime, so this takes that assurance out of the equation. I can't call for supplies at any point during this mission, so every bullet and silencer is precious. This rule will not apply to episode 31 Sahelanthropus, and you'll see why. Vehicles and buddies, again, none of them. All map traversal is done on foot or by stealing a vehicle already in the world, with exceptions upon proof that it's necessary. But again, we'll get to these. As for the character selection, we're always deploying with our worst ranked soldier. These men will gain stats as you complete missions with them, so changing them every so often is a requirement. The equipment restrictions are that no Fultons are allowed. Every person you knock out has the chance to wake up during your mission, and all targets are to be extracted via helicopter only. Everything else is fair game as long as it doesn't interfere with the deployment costs. So what are the mission requirements? The mission requirements are that we extract with no kills and total stealth, as well as an S rank to move on. To acquire an S rank, it's pretty typical to complete the mission as quickly as possible, have no retries, no kills, no reflex, and no alerts, which is mostly avoided with the next rule set, which is further settings restrictions. Here we'll turn off a bunch of different settings, from no reflex mode to no chicken hat to no HUD or marker display, no reticle display, and no auto aim correction. I'm leaving the enemy presence indicators on simply because I'm a pussy. And then lastly is the exempt missions. I'm leaving out episode 1 and 2 as they're mostly just intro missions and aren't really necessary, and also episode 9 as it's necessary to have a fast mode of transportation in these missions, and they're mostly about blowing up a bunch of vehicles. It's not really in the spirit of this challenge. Now, typically this challenge is more for doing on an individual episode basis, to then submit and end up on the leaderboard at the end of the rules thread. I'm going to be using these rules for the entire game. As a seasoned veteran of these games, I think I have what it takes to pull this off. Well, that and the fact that I already have all my footage recorded before I even started writing the script. But anyway, let's begin with episode 3, A Hero's Way. Oh, hold on. Real quick, before we actually get started, I'm going to go over the base loadout that I started with and keep you in the loop every time I adjust it. So for my weapons loadout, I stuck with the standard level 1 MRS-4 and level 2 Wu Tranquilizer pistol. For my support weapons, I had the level 1 C4, the level 1 hand grenades, and a few empty magazines. And lastly, the miscellaneous items I would typically have were the cardboard box and the Phantom cigar. Now, most of these support weapons and items were left unused, and I would later reduce my items down even further since I wouldn't always need things like the C4, and I would never use the Phantom cigar. With most of these challenges, I kind of start off with one idea in mind, then adapt it one way or the other depending on if I deem it too easy or too hard. With this one, I had to adjust the rules to include the stipulation of exiting the mission with no less than an S rank. I lead with the statement to say that I actually ended up completing this mission dead last, since the very first version I had was finished with only an A grade, and I couldn't start off with a failure. So let's skip all the way down my logged footage to explore how this challenge started, or rather, ended. This mission's objective is to infiltrate an enemy outpost and eliminate the Spetsnaz commander located inside. Remember that the entire mission grade being an S relies on us not being spotted nor killing anyone. So you may now be asking, well, how can you complete a mission that's objective is to literally kill someone without killing them? Well, there's two options to go about in this game for missions such as these. You can A, eliminate them, or B, extract them. That's the beauty of this game. There's multiple ways to handle any situation the game throws at you, and almost all of them are effective, oftentimes just changing up your difficulty. I demonstrate this almost immediately after landing into my mission zone and head toward my mission objective. I landed only a few miles away from the enemy FOB and begin my trek in its direction. As I approached the nearby road, I heard an incoming vehicle off in the distance, which gave me an idea. I was gonna steal it. Now, how in the hell did I plan to do this without raising any alarms or being spotted? As I got eyes on the vehicle, I noticed that there were 3 well-equipped soldiers on board, and in all of my training, I knew what must be done. I aimed my weapon, pulled my trigger, and shot at the vehicle, ensuring I wouldn't hit anything but the Jeep. This caused the men to stop and begin a search in my direction, leaving their vehicle ripe for the picking. I ran a wide loop around the direction they might go as to avoid visual contact, and eventually made it to an empty car. I hopped inside and showed an incredible display of driving as I made my way to the objective area of Shago Village. I knew my target was deep inside the heart of this village, so before moving in I did some recon up on the ridge and slept my first victim. This mission began around 7 in the morning and the sun would be very much up in the sky, making this an incredibly tactful infiltration as it would be very easy to spot me in such conditions. After sleeping that first guard, I pushed further into the base using an advanced technique that only the most elite soldiers were taught. The heart of this FOB was relatively clear since those dudes whose Jeep I stole earlier were supposed to be here by now, but we all know why they aren't. I made it up to the building and spotted my target on the second story, and by using the most advanced sneaking techniques known only by the Diamond Dogs, I got in and knocked out the commander, all while Kids of America played in the background. As per the rules, I'm now tasked with sneaking out of here with this dude on my back, since I could neither kill nor Fulton him. Seeing as how the path I took in here was relatively enemy-free, I decided to go out the same way I came in. Obviously, right? Well, there was a moment of panic as I nabbed the commander and was making my way out, as I heard an enemy soldier radioing into HQ, which usually means I did something to make them suspicious. Not triggering a full-blown alert status or seeing anyone in the way, I continued out toward my Jeep. Once I got past the trench fields, I knew I was free of enemy sightlines and sprinted for my destination, packing up the commander in the Jeep, calling in my exfil, and gunning it to the extraction zone. In my rush to get out of here, I almost ran into some soldiers patrolling out on the road near where I stole this Jeep. Luckily, I spotted them before they spotted me, and I was able to avoid them, get to Pequod, and extract myself in the target, finishing this mission with nothing short of a perfect score. 1 down, 33 to go. The next mission, C2W, was also finished near the end of my playthrough, since it was part of the beginning where I was still developing the rules. My first attempt, way back at the start, resulted in only an A grade, so I went back at the end of gathering all my footage and cleaned up any scores that weren't satisfactory, this mission being one of them. I'd done this mission multiple times with near perfect conditions, but they all resulted in obtaining only an A grade. I was examining the score after each successful attempt and realized where I was lacking each time, and that was just it. Time. The drop-off for this mission is quite a ways from the actual mission area, leading me to run a fairly long way to even reach the target area. No matter how fast I ran, how many shortcuts I took, or how much time was shaved off in the actual mission area, there was no way to come out the other side with an S grade, unless I took in an external mode of travel. I didn't expect to break a rule so early on this challenge. Well, I really didn't do it that early. This is one of the last missions I completed, but I proved there was no possible scenario nor vehicles close by for me to steal to reduce my time and bring my score up to an S. That is, until I did the subsistence version of this mission and noticed a truck driving on the road just as I reached my first enemy checkpoint. So I'll be using that footage for this run instead. So with that out of the way, let's hijack this truck and head toward our mission area. The objective here is to destroy the communications equipment at the Eastern Communications Post. Similar to the last mission, my objective is located in the middle of the outpost, so I'd need to sneak in deep to destroy it. As I came up to the village, there were 2 guards stationed on the road to intercept any incoming vehicles. I parked the truck just before this checkpoint and continued up the cliffs on the left to circumvent their sightline. I then needed to avoid the position Claymore's blast radius and safely pick them up from behind. Subsistence missions start you off with 0 equipment, so I'm going to have to get creative on how I approach this. After grabbing the claymores, I proceeded to the base, hugging the cliffside to remain hidden. Now before entering the base, I did a bit of recon, tracking as many enemies as possible via my iDroid. I had a pretty open path to the communications equipment since all the patrols were on their way away from my objective. I made it there safely, planted one of the claymores I'd just picked up, and crawled my way back up the cliffside. One soldier was positioned such that he would have seen me if I didn't knock him out, so that's what I did. In a stroke of luck, as I was heading up the hill to shoot the claymore, a sandstorm came in and made this mission a whole lot easier. There was still one soldier I needed to subdue before taking my shot, but with the cover of the sandstorm, this was a cakewalk. I dumped his body, located the claymore through the window, and gave it a single bullet, causing it to blow up and destroy the equipment. With our objective now complete, I just needed to extract via helicopter. So, still under the cover of the sandstorm, I called in Pequod and made my way to the exfil zone, claiming my second S of the run. Now, I'd like to mention here that this particular mission I counted as a combined effort, since my subsistence run got an S rank while somehow not getting a perfect stealth no kills bonus. I still gotta count it, since, for one, it's a fucking hard mission, but 2, because I was able to pull it off in the regular mission, with the only caveat being that I used my own Jeep instead of the truck. Episode 5, Over the Fence. Now, Over the Fence is the first mission that directly asks us to extract a specific target. In this case, a captive engineer, held somewhere at the Waxen Barracks. I deployed just south of the barracks, which places me atop a cliff overlooking their exterior. This is the optimal starting zone as it allows me to scout out the entire area and plot where the best path to entry is. After plotting my course, I head down the cliff to penetrate the first line of defense by crawling through a culvert under the main road. I totally missed the climbable rock face on my left and ended up continuing into the barracks the old-fashioned way, through the front door. But first, I needed to sleep 3 separate guards who are stationed at various points on the road in. I took them out, hid their bodies, and carried on with my mission. As I crossed this threshold into the barracks, I noticed one guard stationed at a gate, while another was approaching him on a patrol. I waited as the one patrolling passed him before sleeping the stationary one. I hid his body out of sight behind some containers, recognizing the building just up the hill was where I would find my target. I crawled up there to avoid any unnecessary alerts, making my way in and down to the basement of this dilapidated building. I had just one more guard to put to sleep before breaking in and rescuing the prisoner. However, my job was only halfway over. I still needed to escape the barracks and safely exfil with my target. There's just one last guard I needed to sleep before heading out from the way I should have came in. You know, where the climbable rock face was I mentioned earlier. Over here, there was an easy path down if you hugged a large cliff close to your right. And at this point, the enemy noticed the prisoner was gone and had entered an alert status. This does not count as a combat alert and will not be held against us in the final score. I think it may be scripted, but I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, as I watched my enemies scramble around looking for me and the engineer, we're able to remain hidden, call Pequod, and extract with our target, and a perfect score. Where Do the Bees Sleep is definitely one of the longer episodes in this game. The objective of this one is to locate and extract a coveted weapon system named the Honeybee. Sticking to our basic loadout and changing out my soldier for one of lesser skills, I jumped into the mission and get dropped off quite a ways from my objective's actual location. Once my boots hit the ground, I pulled a Forrest Gump and just felt like running. Eventually, I came across a bridge full of enemies, and after a quick scan to see what I was up against, the threat seemed minimal. So I made my way down, around, and up the other side of the bridge, only knocking out one guard as soon as I got there. My trek continued for a while after that, coming across just 2 guards on a road patrol during my travels. After subduing both relatively quickly, I carried on to finally arrive at Das Masi. Now, this was an interesting outpost as half of it consisted of tunnels carved into the side of a cliff face, and also had an enemy gunship flying overhead. I snuck my way into the first part of this base, taking inventory of all enemy combatants I could with my spotting scope. This place was crawling with enemies. I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to manage this one. I figured it'd be a lot of slow crawling around until I could finally get into those tunnels. But this game had other plans for me. In another stroke of luck, I was blessed with yet another sandstorm during this mission, allowing me an opportunity to sneak in a little faster to my destination. I didn't make it all the way in as there were still some guards directly in my path, but with the sandstorm calming and the couple enemies in my way now sleeping soundly, I made it into the cave system. As I went deeper and deeper into the labyrinth of tunnels, I finally met back up with the group holding the man hostage. This man knew where the honeybee was located and he was leading them straight to it. After they passed and I deemed the area clear, I followed their trail only to quickly have my butthole pucker. I almost got spotted by one of the guards. Turning heel and carefully walking back the way I came, I held up in a nearby room and waited for him to pass. Once again, the path was clear and I cautiously continued my way down. As I arrived, the men had just killed their prisoner after verifying the weapon he brought them to. There were 3 of them, all huddled around the weapon I came here to collect from them. I no longer had a silencer for my Woo pistol, so in a 1000 IQ play, I tricked 2 of them into investigating an area by standing where they could see me, but not close enough to identify me. 2 of them went to check it out, so I looped around and knocked the 3rd one out, grabbing his limp body and carrying him away with barely enough time to do so. That one was close. So how was I going to get the other 2? Well, I wasn't. I just had to do the exact same thing, lure the 2 of them out with suspicious activity, then loop around and steal the honeybee. Now that I had the weapon I came for, all I had to do was, holy fucking shit, that was another close call. What the fuck was that? At this point, I was shitting my pants, but by some good fortune, there was an alternate exit that I went down and triggered the cutscene I needed. The skulls show up, and this is where I'm supposed to use the honeybee and fight these little fuckers. But this is a pacifist run, and I was explicitly told not to use any of the ammo. So I did the only thing I could do. I ran. This was the sketchiest part of the mission overall. I cannot believe I made it out of this mission alive. I mentioned a few butt-puckering moments so far in this mission alone, but this one had me basically levitating out of my seat. I'm pretty sure I was 1 bullet away from death here. Anyway, I made it out of the fucking mist, called in Pequod, took the dude out patrolling the road, boarded my ride out of here, all to get another S rank. Fucking hallelujah. Red Brass is the 7th episode in this game, and the objective in this one is to take out 3 commanders. But remember, we can't just simply kill these dudes or Fulton them out. We need to extract all 3 of these commanders via helicopter, a task for the most battle-hardened soldiers. I knew that one of these men would be traveling via Jeep right by my entry point, so all I needed to do was rush down to the road as soon as I hopped out of Pequod. Using the same method as the first mission, I took out my rifle and shot once at the Jeep, making sure, again, to hit only the Jeep. While the 2 soldiers who aren't my target hop out of the car and begin searching for me, I took cover behind a rock, knocked them both out with my Woo pistol, taking a quarter of my silencer to do so. Now, since I was able to do this right next to the exfil zone, it made it incredibly easy to call Pequod back, knock out target number 1, and place him aboard the heli for extraction. Target 2 would be moving out of Wilo Village shortly, so I drove the Jeep I just obtained and scooted my ass in his direction. The intel must have been slightly off because this man wasn't leaving in a hurry. I spent a good few minutes waiting outside the village for this guy, and I became so impatient that I even tried infiltrating the village in search of him. But no such luck. Eventually, him and his men spawned in and rallied in yet another jeep, ready to get out of there. Too bad I used my first jeep to block the road I knew he was going to leave from, and it worked out flawlessly. I spooked them with a shot to their car, then while they were stuck on my parked car, I slept the driver, the second guard, and lastly the commander. Calling in Pequod, scooping up my second target, and bringing him to be redeemed. Now, as for this last commander, I knew I'd need to penetrate inside Wilo Village. I was fortunate enough at the beginning of my trek inside, a sandstorm hit, and I promise I'm not scripting these. This just gave me the time and cover I needed to take out a couple of guards before the sandstorm was over. Getting closer to the heart of the base, a dude I knocked out earlier wakes up and calls into command, putting the base on high alert. This mission would have been made a lot easier if I didn't absolutely waste the rest of my silencer in a panic trying to sleep a dude. There I was, neck deep in shit, inside a base full of alert guards with no silencer on my pistol. I had a couple more close calls with being spotted before deciding to pull out of the village for a quick breather and a mental reset. After a couple deep breaths, I went back in, overanalyzing every step, making sure there would be no more mistakes. Sure enough, that reset was exactly what I needed. I pushed into the base with ease, got spooked by the commander, knocked him out, snuck him to the outside of the village, called in Pequod, and rushed his ass to the landing zone. Even though this mission took me almost 30 minutes to complete, I still pulled off a Foxhound S. This next mission, if it's not painfully obvious by the amount of files I have with the label fails after its name, was, well, painful to say the least. This was mainly due to it being a multi-part mission. My first task is to sneak into an enemy FOB and obtain some deployment plans on a convoy that would be passing through this valley. Before heading up to the base though, I set up all 4 of my C4 in preparation of this convoy. Hugging the cliffside on the left of the road, I made my way up to the base, ignoring almost every guard I'd pass by, except for this guy and this guy. After doing all this and obtaining the documents, a cutscene will trigger and begin the second part of the mission. The next part was pretty reliant on the little bit of pre-planning that I just did. My goal was to sneak back out of the village and blow up this entire convoy made up of 2 tanks and a truck. The tanks in this portion don't count as killing anyone, so blowing them up is fine and, well, required. However, the truck contains a driver as well as the colonel I'm supposed to be eliminating. Remember those C4 I placed earlier? Well, those were going to be the first line of offense in an attempt to get the convoy to stop, hoping these C4 were enough to take care of the 2 tanks. I made it to the bottom of the hill next to my trap and waited for the most opportune time. The first tank drove right over my C4 and I set him to detonate. This stopped the tanks for now, but the truck was driving off in a panic. In a last-ditch effort to get the truck to stop, I began shooting the tires until finally one of them popped, right as my silencer broke. I ran up and put a bullet in the shoulder of the driver since it was the only way to get him out. Trust me, do I have to show you the amount of fails again? No? No? Okay, good. After knocking out both the driver and the colonel, I put the colonel back in the truck to wait for me to come back. I planned on coming back after finishing off the tank I nearly destroyed. Using all the grenades I had, I did just that. Now after this, I called in Pequod and delivered the colonel and went back to destroy the last tank. On my way back, I came across a small outpost and holy shit, there was a tank equipped with a 30mm autocannon and some missiles. I had bad luck in previous runs using these missiles, so I went down the more sane route and used only the 30mm cannon to gun down all remaining ops. All there was left to do was to leave by calling in Pequod and getting the fuck out of there, obtaining an S grade as a reward. Yet another episode I took multiple attempts at before arriving at a successful mission. This mission differed from all the other ones because it required the use of decoys, marking this as the first time I altered my layout in any type of way. This mission was to rescue and extract a specific prisoner from a ruined palace in the middle of a desert. The random deployment time blessed me with this mission being during the night, making it a bit easier since much of it takes place out in the open. Malik, the prisoner, I spotted all loaded up in the back of a jeep, looking like they were on the brink of moving him to another location. I'm trying to stop them just as they're leaving the palace as to avoid any combat. I first slept the 2 guards patrolling the road leading out from the palace, so I wouldn't be pushed from both sides after hearing the impending commotion. Then I set up my decoys in C4 and what I thought would be an appropriate distance. As a pair of vehicles began to leave the area and head toward my trap, I came to realize my calculations were way off. The guards in the jeep spotted my decoys so far away that they didn't even make it to the C4 themselves, Either way, I missed a ton of shots with my Wu pistol, but managed to eventually knock out both guards. Now, at this point, I was clean out of C4 and there was no way of retrieving it, so the only thing I had left to do was find a rock to hide behind and begin lobbing grenades, hoping to God I had enough. By all that is holy, as my last grenade left my hand and exploded on the tank, it was the exact amount I needed to complete my mission. Before the alerted guards at the palace could make their way to me, I got in the jeep and hauled my ass to the nearest extraction zone, called my Uber, and extracted with the target. Add another S to the board. Episode 11 was actually pretty straightforward and simple. In this mission is where we encounter Quiet and must decide what to do with her. For this loadout, I got rid of my decoys and added the level 1 version of the Rednov sniper rifle. I did this because my pistol aim is shit, obviously, and adding it only brought my GMP to 3380. I won't spend too much time on this mission since it's all about the same thing, waiting behind cover, baiting Quiet to shoot at me so I could identify where she was, baiting out another shot, then firing upon her. Each time she's hit, she'll move to a new location, but I just found another rock to hide behind and repeated the process I just went over. After 5 well-placed shots, she goes down and I get to choose what to do with her from here. Naturally, I'd pull the trigger, but this time I decided not to, no kills and all. Hellbound begins with a few cutscenes revealing Skullface's secret weapon, Sahelanthropus. Immediately after these cutscenes, we're put in control of Snake, deep inside the walls of the Serac power plant. The main objective from this point is to locate and extract Dr. Emmerich. He's located a few miles away at the Afghanistan CBC. Now, normally, and in my first few attempts, I'd need to run all the way to this base camp from the power plant, since there's no available vehicles. Completing this mission under these circumstances leads to a less than ideal score due to the extra time it would take. Instead, in a previous attempt, I unlocked the parcel drop-off locations at both the power plant and the central base camp. This would allow me near instant travel between the two regions with the help of a cardboard box. But first, I'd need to make my way through the power plant and reach the pickup location on the other side of the area. This involved sleeping 2 enemies, sneaking past another 3, almost getting caught, avoiding a patrol helicopter, and sleeping the last enemy before procuring my box and relocating to the central base camp. This camp is where I would find Emmerich. He's located in one of the buildings near the back of the base. As I popped out of the box after getting dropped off, I get a little cavalier with my confidence and began sprinting toward my target. This led me to nearly running straight into a guard who wasn't there on any of my previous attempts. But with my cat-like reflexes, I immediately turned around and made myself invisible to the passing guard. I knock him out, destroy their comms equipment, and continue pushing into the base. The path is pretty clear for a while, so I get down on a bit of cardio while hugging the cliff to my right. I eventually came across a few more enemies, but after narrowly avoiding their line of sight, I spotted the building housing Emmerich. There were 2 dudes positioned at the entrance. I silently crawled around their field of view and approached them with the utmost tact, exactly how I imagined Big Boss would do it. After essentially kidnapping the doctor, I must now exit with him on my back, all while continuing to remain unseen. This would be the hardest part of the mission as I'm now not able to crawl. After making it through the first building and rounding the second corner of the cliffside, another event triggered, making this part even more harder. The base entered an alert status. Great. I continued along, shooting at a guard standing in the way and totally missing the shot on purpose so he'd be distracted. Going back through the way I came in, most of the path was clear of enemies. That is, until I remembered I couldn't actually go out the way I came in. I had to make my way out through the true entrance of the base, the front gate. The reason for this is because of a scripted scene that plays out as soon as you get there. Enter Sahelanthropus.
Sahelanthropus? How?
So that's the metal gear he built for the Soviets.
Impossible!
Now, it seems impossible to get a perfect stealth score at this point since this giant mechanoid is shooting literally right at me. Well, it isn't, so that's cool. My many years of brainwashing and Diamond Dogs training kicked in at this very moment, and I ran to my first bit of cover I could find, a truck on my left. This seemed like a dangerous play as Sahelanthropus could easily blow this thing up with any of its decimating weapons. Emmerich and I got incredibly close to that happening, but luckily it eventually gave up and began searching elsewhere. This was the opportunity I was looking for. I grabbed Emmerich and began sprinting toward the new extraction zone. Sahelanthropus was positioned on the left side of this narrow corridor I had to run in, so I positioned on the right, trying my best to remain behind cover. The path was smooth sailing right up until about halfway to Pequod. Sahelanthropus began searching directly toward my position. This was not good. I don't know how, but I managed to maneuver myself like a fox in the tall grass, snaking in and out of cover, trying to get as far away as I could from this thing. Butthole puckered the entire time. I had one more long, wide open stretch to run before arriving at the landing zone. The thing happened one more time. It began coming straight for me, like it knew where I was hiding. Scared as hell and shitting bricks, I held my ground, dancing around this rock, mirroring its every move. Once I had an opening, I took it, dashing as fast as I could to the LZ, but before I could reach cover, I got the dreaded marker on my screen. It saw me. Fuck. This was certainly a mission failure, but I figured I'd let it play out, just holding out hope for that coveted S rank. Sahelanthropus was puppy guarding my LZ, but I'd broken line of sight enough that it went back into search mode. It sent out its drone, so I hid Emmerich and I in a cardboard box until they exploded. In the scariest moment of this entire run, after unequipping my cardboard box and picking Emmerich back up, Sahelanthropus turned and began sprinting in my direction, passing right over top of me. Holy fucking shit, that was stressful. I hid some more until I saw my opening, and I'd finally made my way back up to Pequod, loaded up Emmerich, got myself aboard, took off, shot that fucking thing in the face, and got the hell out of there. And boy am I glad I didn't reset. Fuck yeah. Now, the episodes only get harder from here. Pitch Dark is yet another butt-clenching episode. I'm supposed to break into this heavily guarded oil field, blow up an oily water separator tank, and shut down an oil transfer pump. Now on paper, this sounds relatively easy minus the whole heavily guarded part. The reality is that Mephidna oil field has fairly limited ways of infiltration, and my two objectives are in the complete opposite direction of each other. The first part of this mission is mainly just sneaking through Massa Village, since its only crime is standing in our way of Mephidna. Not much to report here other than spotting some child soldiers. There was a jeep positioned at the end of the village, and you better believe I took it to get to the oil field faster. Upon arrival, it was still daytime and I didn't want to rush the process, so I used my scope to take inventory and track my enemies. I eventually made my way down to the entrance and put the first and second guard to sleep, wasting 5 bullets and precious silencer health because I sometimes suck at shooting. Okay, it's all the time. Fuck you. Crawling ever so stealthily inside, another guard spotted the 2 KO'd on the ground. I domed him on my first try. See? I told you. Then I proceeded to hide all 3 of them in their own private locations. I weighed my options on what path I should take and ultimately landed by taking the right side. Picking a few locks and avoiding a few guards, I continued down to the oily water separator to place a couple C4. I came across a couple more guards in the process, tactfully choking one out and not so tactfully wasting 3 more bullets. I hid these 2 bodies out of sight and proceeded to place 2 C4, then quickly changed my mind as I might need that other one later. Thus began the slow crawl back toward the button that, when activated, would kill the transfer pump. It was a couple stories up from my current location. This area was crawling with enemies, and I had maybe 1 or 2 shots before my silencer was gone. Shortly after climbing the stairs, I'd got myself into quite a predicament. I was being closed in on by 3 dudes all at the same time. I did the only thing I could do, and I laid on the ground, held my breath, and waited for this to all be over. And it worked. All 3 of them converged, slapped each other's dicks, and went on their way. God damn, my ass is about to be rock solid at the end of this run. There was just one more dude standing in my way of pushing that button. 1 tap to the head and he was out like a light. I grabbed his body to hide it and smashed that like button. All hell broke loose when I did this, obviously. This wasn't the most quiet action, and in an attempt to throw everyone off, at that moment, I detonated the C4 I'd placed earlier, hoping to pull some attention away from my location. I climbed out of the window closest to me and held my ground, monitoring my enemy's movement via my iDroid. Once I deemed the coast was clear, I hopped down and carried through back the way I'd come. There were now walker gears positioned on the road blocking my path of exit, and with no silencer, I had no option other than sneaking around them. Called in Pequod to an empty field and extracted with that S rank. Alright, let's take a breath of the chaos, right? Lingua Franca is probably one of the quickest and most straightforward episodes if you know what you're doing. This mission takes us to Kaziba Camp in search of a British prisoner known as the Viscount. See, since I've played my fair share of this game and just failed a lot, I know exactly where the Viscount is being held, and it's just a matter of getting there without being spotted. I surveyed the area as soon as I breached the hill and took inventory of my surroundings. After marking everyone I could see, I continued almost a beeline pattern to the Viscount's held location. This mission is actually supposed to be much longer, as you're supposed to check multiple prisoner locations throughout the camp until you find him. But we have no time to lose, literally. There's just one guard securing the Viscount at this time, so all I need to do upon arrival was shoot him in the head with a tranq round and call in an extraction. Total mission time, 6 minutes, and a perfect S. The same thing goes for Footprints of Phantoms as it did for Lingua Franca. If you know what you're doing, this mission is cake. The goal here, destroy or recover 4 walker gears being held at Ditati Village. This mission is so easy, I did this my first try in broad daylight. The walker gears are split up in pairs of 2 and only have a few guards in between them. Taking the right side route up and into the village, I snuck behind the 2 patrolling the road and tried to find a good position to attack on my enemy. 2 guards are stationed at the first set of tents, with another that would come up from a lower tent if I spent too much time here. I took the first one out, then moved on to the second. This dude would not go to sleep, no matter how many times I shot him. It wasn't until I moved closer to get a clean headshot off on him that he went limp and crumpled into the ground. The coast was now clear, and all I had to do was take these 2 walker gear away from enemy sightlines and blow them up. Now, blowing these up was going to make a lot of noise and cause an alarm, so I decided to wait until I had all of them. For now, I just took these 2 around a massive rock for safekeeping, all going off without a hitch. Now for the other 2. They were in a nearby location in relation to the other 2, and they had 2 guards watching over them as well. I took the first one out with ease, but almost got blasted by the second by trying to leg sweep the air next to him. However, I tactfully moved a bit closer and took him out without raising any further alarm. As extra assurance, I took his body up the hill to be hidden before relocating the other 2 walker gears behind the rock with the others. I bundled them all in a nice neat little pile and equipped them all with their very own C4. I took a few steps back from the danger zone and blew them all sky high. I wish I could have taken them back with me, but that would be a breach of the rules. Sorry, walker gears. We'll reunite again. With the targets disposed of, all there was left to do was call in a pickup, leaving the mission area with another perfect S. And here we are, the second Skulls mission. These missions are the bane of this run. Skulls are powerful, fast, and are capable of ruining your day. There was a lot of trial and error with this mission in regards to how to approach it. Many of these later missions, it really comes down to your knowledge of them. The natural approach to this mission is to infiltrate a small outpost, secure some documents within it to find out where and when this caravan will be. I did this multiple times on my first few attempts, but then I thought, I know where this truck is going to be. I don't actually need to secure this paperwork. All I needed to do was wait. So that's what I did. For a while. This was especially hard because I didn't think I could kill the skulls without losing that bonus. And even if I managed to sneak into the truck, they were somehow always alerted and would destroy the truck before I could leave the mission area. So then I did some digging. How were other people doing this so easily? I came across a video showing me exactly where the truck is parked and how to get there quickly. I say quickly because I forgot to mention there's this pair of tanks on their way to the same target in preparation for an escort, and I needed to beat them there. I had plenty of time to sprint there before the escort would arrive and then got into battle with the skulls. Now, battle is a fairly loose term here because, well, this isn't exactly combat. No, the best approach to a fully stealth run of this mission is to remain prone and kite the 4 soldiers around the neighboring building. This would put them out of sight of me and allow me to get away with ease. After minutes of crawling and waiting for their zombie asses to turn the corner around that building, I finally see my opportunity and seized it. The truck was mine, and I was out of there. Taking the truck out of the area completes the mission and rewards me with my 13th S rank. Whew. I guess I don't have to explain this mission to you. It's in the title, but I'm gonna anyway. This mission gave me so much trouble. I almost settled for an A and killed the run here, and this mission wasn't even really that hard. It's just so much easier if you can complete it quickly since one of the agents is hidden in the jungle and would be shot upon being spotted. So, although not inherently hard, the time constraints in this mission make it or break it. I failed this mission so many times that I wouldn't go back and complete it until the very end of gathering my footage. It was among those of the last missions I'd completed. Now, this is also one of the only missions I would bring along a vehicle, as the time window has to be near perfect for rescuing the agent hiding out inside the swamp. There were enemies everywhere around this swamp. I pulled up, exited my vehicle, and began my descent into hostile territory. There was only one enemy I'd actually come across in my way into the swamp, but as soon as I locate and grab my first target, that's when the enemies came swarming in. I was first noticed from my right as I was exiting the swampy area, so I corrected by turning to my left. Well, on my left, there were 2 highly geared soldiers coming in my direction as well. I course corrected one last time in hopes that I would make it out of here without raising any alarms, and by the grace of outer heaven, I successfully made it out of there with the first target on my back. I pulled out my iDroid to determine the best pickup location. The one I wanted to use was dangerously close to the swamp, so in a risky move, I set my first target down near this future LZ and went off to find the other. Pushing into Kaziba camp, again, I met with a bit of resistance. I looped around the village to avoid any conflict as I entered the camp and tried to push in from the side I believed my target would be on. I had 1, 2, 3 guards to sleep before securing my second target. After doing so, I grabbed the prisoner and made my way back to the LZ. And about halfway to the LZ, I called in Pequod so he'd arrive at the same time as me, ensuring an easy extraction. Sure enough, I was right. Everything from then on was smooth sailing. Another S rank for the books. Blood Runs Deep is the absolute worst mission in this entire game, and the single hardest under these wind conditions. This one is just a fucking escort mission with a bunch of kids that have an AI that doesn't really respond that well to your commands. It's just a bit janky. The majority of all my failures on this run were from these kids either running too far ahead and alerting the guards, or falling too far behind and alerting the guards. But let's go back to the start and pick it up from there. Kunkenga Mines is the location of this quest, but before I'd get there, I'd need to locate and extract one of the outlier prisoners. There were 6 in total that I needed to extract, and this first one put this entire run in jeopardy of being a failure. He was such a pain in the ass to knock out, carry all the way to the mines, and extract him there, that I was considering just Fultoning this dude right out of the gate, so I didn't have to bother carrying him 2 miles to the closest extraction. It was a pain, yes, but was it also possible? Yes again. So it must be done. After dumping him off at the helicopter and dismissing it, I turned toward the mine and began plotting how I was going to breach it. It was a wide open area with plenty of guard patrols. I knew I was going to need all the silencer health and bullets I had to make it through the second part of this mission, so I was very cautious on how I approached this section. Like many of these missions, a big part of my strategy was to hug one of the walls and remain in the shadows as much as I possibly could. The same strategy was applied here as well. Sticking close to the right side wall, I found some things I could climb on to give me a height advantage over my foes. I still had to be ultra conservative with my movements as there were still plenty of eyes to easily spot me. I eventually had to hop down off my ledge and pass a few groups of guards slithering by like a little snake on my belly. After quite a bit of rolling around in the dirt, I made it to the location of the 5 remaining prisoners. They were kids. Snake knew the only thing left to do was to commit a war crime and blame it on the opposition. Nah, I'm just kidding. He was just searching for some diamonds using his gun as a shovel. Typical soldier shit. Anyway, the events after rescuing these kids is where the difficulty gets cranked up a few notches. Like I said earlier, the AI is kinda trash on this group of kids, so you gotta be quick with your decisions and movement. The kids and I moved past the first 2 groups of guards with ease, sleeping any I deemed that were an immediate threat. Oh, and as you can already clearly tell, one of these kids is injured and needs to be carried all the way to the extraction, making my methods of stealth even more limited. The third camp is where shit gets dicey and panic-inducing. Once you've reached this spot, the enemy notices that the kids are missing and sends out a search party to find them. This causes us to have enemies spawn behind us and puts on some serious pressure. From here on out, time is of the absolute essence. I took out the outer 2 guards, each with a perfect headshot. Then I rushed to the building where I knew at least 2 more would be camping. I slept one with my pistol and threw the kid on my back of the other, knocking him out in the process. As I bent down to pick the kid back up, I turned and noticed there was actually one more inside the building. In a panic, I set the kid back down in preparation for a fight and was jump scared by a completely different dude. I was so glad I was able to judo throw this first guy outside of the building, buying me some time to rush in and handle the other. Oh my god, that was stressful as hell. But it's not over yet. As the attack helicopter... Oh yeah, there's an attack helicopter. As the attack helicopter flies overhead and the soldiers in view of the children, there's nothing I can do but sweat and watch as they narrowly evade hostile sight. Thank fuck.
But wait!
There's more! The two dudes who were just knocked out, not slept, began waking up. I'm so glad I conserved my silencer because A, there was a helicopter right the fuck above me, and B, I did not want to do this whole mission over again, this close to the end. Alright, so once those two were slept, thank God, the helicopter left, thank God, and the children made it to me safely, thank fuck. With the one injured still on my back, the group kept running until we narrowly escaped to Pequod. I loaded up all 5 of the remaining children and extracted from the zone. Mission success. On the Trail is another one of those missions where it helps to have some inside knowledge. I'm supposed to trail a jeep carrying a person of interest who is going to help me by leading me to my actual target. There's no harm in following him all the way to the destination, but the much faster way is to just rush as fast as possible to the meetup location. After failing this mission once or twice, I knew exactly where this spot was and sprinted my way over to it. My job was to eliminate this commander, but we all know the rules by now. I made it to the spot, and lo and behold, I found the commander. He was well guarded by 4 well-endowed men, so I decided to just observe, hoping to find a window I could capture him in. I made my way down the cliff I was scouting from as 2 of the commander's men peeled off to begin their meeting. I crawled as close as I could to try and get a good view of the meeting, but this almost got me spotted. I was able to recover from it fairly quickly and evade an alarm. I was so tempted to sleep my target early, but I knew this would be a mistake and I would surely fail due to it. Instead, I just waited for the meeting to happen. This worked out perfectly for me as I picked off a few guards as they split off to secure a larger area. I picked off the 2 that would likely put me at risk of getting caught, and the second one drop into the ground caught the attention of the 2 important individuals. They came over to inspect the situation, and in order to stop them from doing this, I quickly sleeped them both with a shot to the head. When these 2 are seemingly no longer active, it seems like the rest of the guards will just peel off to the nearest camp, allowing me to hijack one of the 2 jeeps and make my way to the LZ with the commander in the passenger seat. Another S in the bank. Now, this next episode is fairly gimmicky. It's really just here to provide a bit more story. Well, I guess most of the missions are intended for this purpose, but this one definitely more so. The objective is to follow some intel that we got about some experiments being done in the Nguma industrial zone. This area is tucked back pretty far in the cliffs just past a narrow checkpoint of Munoko Station. Shibani, the leader of the kids we saved, was said to be there as well, so part of our mission relies on securing him. I dropped into the location just outside Munoko Station and began my sneaky passage through this enemy checkpoint. Sticking to the right side of this outpost, I cleared most of the area without firing a single bullet. Only 2 were spent as I safely lockpicked my way through the other side of the outpost. Out here are 2 things, a truck and 1 lone enemy combatant. I slept the guard, totally on the first try, and boarded the truck to make a long trip shorter. I arrived just outside the industrial zone and saw the bridge was no longer in service. This led to me tracking down the river and past an enemy encampment set up to stop people like me from entering. With minimal contact, I made it through. Finally reaching the industrial zone, I sprint my way up to the ominous building to meet up with Shibani. After this fairly gory cutscene plays out, we're placed back in control of Snake, now being chased by the man on fire. I made my way out of the building as quickly as I could and hid here to recover some of my health. Running towards the tunnel I came from to trigger a sequence, I continue hiding from the man on fire. I position myself near a water tower, just in case he tries anything, then call in a pickup from Pequod. After a short delay, I blew the water tower, showering the man on fire, and climbed aboard Pequod for yet another S ranking. I now have 17 S ranks out of the 34 total needed to finish this challenge. The latter half of this challenge will come out in no longer than 2 weeks. Well, I'm not entirely sure yet, but until then, I'll see y'all next time.